Each year, thousands of leaders managing higher education institutions face the need to address financial restrictions in their organizations while increasing their outputs. Several studies have examined the effects of initiatives intended to increase the quantity and quality of student graduates by modifying the services offered by the program. Despite the importance of the outputs generated by higher education institutions, this paper finds there's a limited body of academic literature that could be utilized to help leaders address the financial restrictions they face while improving their outputs. This study intends to shed light on how academic literature could be used to enhance the efficiency of higher education institutions. Through this paper, we will take a look at the financial limitations being faced by these institutions and the difficulties of addressing the issue by focusing on the efficiency of their operations. Thereafter, we will look at a selected number of studies that have measured initiatives designed to increase the quantity and quality of the graduates in different programs and the applicability of these initiatives in different contexts. We will end with an appreciation of how these studies can aid leaders in the education world to address the financial limitations faced in their organizations. According to the 2011 Presidential Perspectives Report done by Inside Higher Education, the most important issues being confronted by public, private, and for-profit institutions are financially related. The public institutions mention budget shortfall. The private, non-for-profit allude to rising cost affordability of their programs. And the for-profits chose cuts to the students' federal aid program as their highest cause of concern. The financial constraints present in educational organizations have highlighted the need to address measures that will increase their efficiency. A simple definition of efficiency presented by Salerno says that for any organization, the ratio of inputs to outputs is what counts. However, the different inputs that are needed to produce educational outcomes and the relationship between them are not as simple to identify. Grubb maps these inputs out and identifies them according to the following: simple inputs, such as class size; compound inputs, which are a combination of simple ones, such as class size, and teacher ability; complex inputs, such as pedagogic approach or school leadership; abstract inputs, such as school climate and stability; and students themselves as inputs. Grubb identifies 4 other forces which act around the institution but also contribute to its educational outcomes. He identifies family background, financing, and government policies, as well as each student's motivation, or as he calls it, connectedness to schooling. In addition to the different inputs that an educational institution holds, schooling and the educational experience that should come out of it has very different expected outputs from different constituencies. According to Vegas and Petro, there are governments who see education as a catalyst for building civil attributes, economists who see it as engine for growth and equality, and sociologists who see it as a mean for social movement and transformation. Some human rights activists go even further and advocate for education as a basic human right. But some businessmen also see it as a way to make a living. William Bowen believes that regardless of their legal status or ownership, educational institutions have an obligation to produce much more than products at a fair price, like other for-profit institutions. They should contribute to students so that they may live productive lives, function as platforms for opportunity and social mobility, generate knowledge of all kinds, regardless of its immediate market applicability and value, and create critical voice that will defend cultural, moral, and intellectual values. It is therefore believed that educational institutions have multi-product offerings that harbor the desires of various stakeholders. Since higher education organizations have a diverse set of interrelated inputs and outputs, measuring efficiency is a complex endeavor which has invoked a limited, albeit growing number of studies to learn from. The following is a review of different research projects that provide insights so that managers could devise better solutions in administering the resources in educational organizations. The studies reviewed are grouped by those that identify two of the most common measures of output, the quantity and quality of graduates. Bettinger and Long looked at the remediation work that had to be done with 1/3 of the entering post-secondary students in the US. They found that a student in a remediation course is 13.7% more likely to drop out than one who is not. Once they adjusted for the inherent bias in the population of remediation students versus the ones that already had the necessary mathematical and English backgrounds, they found out that a person taking remediation course are nearly 10% less likely to drop out than other similar students. During the year 2000, public universities in Ohio charged $15 million to teach 20,000 freshman students remedial courses and booked an expense for the same amount. If an institution is assessing whether they should offer remedial courses, it would be sensible to compare the $750 per student cost incurred together with the potential gains in graduation rates against other methods. Jensen studies whether accurate information on the return to education affect graduation rates in elementary kids in the Dominican Republic. He establishes a high measured return to secondary schooling, but also identifies that the perceived return by students were low. He then showed how an intervention that increased the knowledge on the returns to schooling both increased the perceived returns as well as the graduation rates. This analysis presents an interesting opportunity for managers of schools where the perceived return is lower than the actual, as they could invest on inexpensive programs of knowledge dissemination to quickly improve graduation rates. Ryan used an ordinary least squares regression to determine the effects that different expenditures had on graduation rates. He found that instructional expenditures have the highest influence over graduation rates. For every 1% increase in instructional spending, it could be expected to have over 0.25% increase in the cohort graduation rate. Expenditures on academic support services also had a positive influence in graduation rates. By contrast, student services, which are intended to improve students' well-being, did not appear to have a positive or significant effect on degree completion. It is worthy to note that the majority of funds in the student services category are allocated towards admissions and financial aid, which could overshadow the effects of other services. From Ryan's work, it is implied that having a lean administration that will free up resources for academic purposes seems to be the best bet to improve graduation rates. On a similar piece of work, Weber and Ehrenberg looked at whether expenditures in services other than instructional ones would increase graduation rates. They found out that an additional $100 per student investment in student services would in fact increase graduation rates by 0.2 percentage points. This result, although statistically significant, has a small potential, especially when compared to the increase in graduation expected by remediation as shown by Bertinger and Long. Moreover, this result runs contrary to the findings by Ryan. Other opportunities which sound less intuitive might hold a good proposition. Scott Clayton presented a case whereby free or reduced tuition to students who maintained a minimum GPA in course load resulted in an increase in graduation rates. This study was conducted at a state level and might not apply to individual institutions. However, the reduced tuition, which could be interpreted as an expansion of merit scholarships, could be a cost-effective strategy for increasing graduation rates. Further research and analysis would have to be produced to conclude this. Conducted an investigation on the effects of school size on the grades of undergraduate students. In the heart of the analysis was whether bigger classes created economies of scale or diseconomies of scale. They applied a logistic regression and found that average grade point declines as class size increases. The decline in grades is more precipitous until the class reaches a size of 20. From thereafter, the effect is still felt, but gradually. In the analysis, they did not offer a reason for the results, nor did they intend to quantify the costs of the lower grades. However, if the management of an educational institution would be able to establish the cost, they would adhere to the quality of their graduating students. Then, they could identify an optimal size of classroom. Even if higher education institutions are in need to manage their financial constraints, the focus on efficiency is limited by the multi-product nature of their operations. Moreover, the reduced academic findings on the matter present a limited source of knowledge that a decision maker facing the immediate pressure of resource limitations can rely on. Given the importance to the economic growth of every country and also to the individuals that attend these institutions, it is of critical importance to build a more ample and cohesive academic view on the matter of efficiency in higher education institutions.